Welcome to the No Show. This is not a show. I am not a host, but this is my guest, Sanjay Nadarajah. Sanjay, you do um, GDP and GMP consulting for lots and lots of companies. And it is a really cool business that a lot of people who watch my stuff aren't very familiar with. Even me, a few years ago, when I first learned about GDP, somebody asked me about it, and I said, "Yeah, I took college economics. I know what GDP is, gross domestic product."
Yeah.
And they started explaining to me what it is, and I thought, "Man, I got to figure this out." And how did I figure it out? I called you. You're the expert on it. So let's start with that. How did you get into pharma quality?
Well, for me, I started my journey in the pharmaceutical industry back in 1998. So going back quite a few years back. And prior to that, I graduated with a degree in chemistry. So it was like my natural path to kind of fall into the sort of sciences space. And Novartis was foolish enough to take me in. So I went into Novartis and quality control, and that's where my journey began in quality. And really, I think it's a good place for any quality profession to start is in the lab, kind of testing the products, doing the kind of bench chemistry work, and you really learn a lot about the analytics and also how to apply that, in other aspects of the work as you progress in quality. And that's where my journey started in quality control. And through that, over a few years, I kind of moved my way into different roles in quality. So moving out of the lab and then into quality assurance, and then with quality assurance, kind of looking at the entire kind of manufacturing operations and the kind of challenges that are faced in production, because not every 2 days are the same. We can come across certain issues, and the key of quality there is to make sure that we keep that consistency as much as we can with all those variabilities that happen around, the kind of human intervention and kind of operation of the processes. And over that time, I got to learn about different ways of applying quality. I worked for various different companies. Everyone does it in their own unique way, but there's no real wrong way to do it. It's just a way that you find best fits around what you do in your operations. So I'd learned a lot over those years. And in 2011, after having worked in UK, European quality role and global role, I then decided I'd hit the glass ceiling in my career. And that's when I thought, right, I think I've learned enough now to kind of do it on my own. And that's when 2011, we started Inglasia Pharma Solutions. And that consultancy is a company that supports various clients, from manufacturers through to distributors, not just in Europe, but globally. And during that time, I thought, how do I get myself seen? How do I get people to recognize that I'm a consultant now and this is what I do? And that's why I found LinkedIn. There was not many people on there at that time, back in 2011. I started to just share my knowledge, things that I learned in the previous roles I'd worked at. And I was putting stuff out there. And as I was doing that, there was more and more people kind of engaging with me. They were finding that some of the stuff I was sharing, information, was stuff that they couldn't easily access. I'm talking about places like China, India, Africa, some parts where the regulations haven't been as hot as it's been in Europe or in the US. So they were really reaching out to me and saying, look, can you help me with this? I need to understand what the concept is around, some of these technicalities of GMP. And as I was sharing the information, they were starting to obviously connect with me, follow me, and that's how I kind of started growing my network. And then I thought, let's start with a group on LinkedIn. So I started the GMP GDP free information sharing group. And that group, since 2011, has rapidly grown. And now we have, over 115,000 members there. And they're all, again, sharing information on best practices. A lot of people posting on there. And that's really kind of living its own life now with everyone that's in there, just freely sharing, which is great. And I've seen actually over this period of time of now, 15 years, that people are really starting to understand the requirements of GMP and GDP to a level that's almost fairly consistent wherever in the world. And I think That's through the free information sharing sort of mindset, and that's what I'm really pleased about seeing, because for me, I don't want people to be deprived of information that they then end up in a situation where they have a regulatory authority inspection where their risk gets slapped by the inspector because no one was really helping them understand the concept well enough. So
Yeah. I love the take that you have on sharing information. I think a lot of us, if we have something valuable, we're not going to tell anyone about it. We're going to make sure that we get paid to share it. Because in our minds, we're like, I don't want to give this away. This is the thing that makes me awesome. People don't know this. So you take the opposite approach, which I think is great. And that's what's led to you having so many uh, contacts and connections on there. And not just, hey, I don't want somebody to end up in trouble with a regulator. In your industry, it's really about the patient and the patient's survival or treatment or good outcomes. So it's not just, I want people to have this information so that they follow the regulations. It's, I want everyone to have this information so maybe another person or another 10,000 people have a better chance at fighting off whatever they're fighting. So, really amazing to see that, especially in that space where so many people rely on these processes for survival. So, I mean, probably it sounds like really, really aggrandizing to say this, but you're probably actually saving lives by sharing information.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go to that extreme, but I think I think it's more really about trying to make sure that we work in the most effective way and the most compliant way for the patient, right? Where we're not doing more than we need to, and we're not dropping the ball on things that we need to hold on to for the interest of the patient, and that's where a lot of my kind of education comes into it, in terms of what I'm trying to basically tell people through LinkedIn and through my clients, in terms of how I train them about, let's focus on what's really necessary, because there's so much going on in the world. There's so much, in terms of even businesses competing with one another, that it causes situations where people can compromise and drop the ball. So it's making sure that we focus on the priorities really at this time. This is what I try and tell my clients, as well as what I'm sharing on LinkedIn.
Let's go backward before we go dive deeper, because I think a lot of viewers are going to say, what is he talking about? GXP, GDP, GMP, just like I was a few years ago. They're saying these guys are using language I've never heard before. I don't
Yeah.
even, it's something related to pharma. I can tell that. I don't even know what they're talking about. Explain what it is and why it's important and where it came from.
Good question. Good question. Well, it's really, the industry, pharmaceutical industry, is highly regulated, and we've had to learn lessons from many years back. There are so many stories where we've not actually made the product in the way in accordance to specifications, and because of this, it's resulted in products being put out on the market, patients taking them and suffering serious adverse effects, and in some cases fatalities. And this is where it really all stems from, right? We've all learned from our own mistakes. And that is by implementing those standards that we need to be aware of, so that we don't make those same mistakes again. And that's where all of this is really coming from. And what happens here is that if we don't actually document what we do at each and every step, we don't know whether we've tripped up anywhere along the way. And that's where we were going back many years ago, and over these last 30-40 years, there's been more and more emphasis on how we document and how we assess the risks around what we're doing in the pharmaceutical space, whether that be manufacturing or distribution. How are we documenting what we do? So the whole concept of good practice means basically how we're documenting in whichever area we work in, whether that be manufacturing, distribution, clinical trials, or pharmacovigilance, for example, right, where you just put the X with the relevant letter, which could be manufacturing, and so on. So that's where this comes from. Essentially, what we're doing in quality is documenting what we do, and using that documented data to find ways of optimizing our processes and ensuring the level of quality keeps stepping up again.
Yeah, and the EU has sort of codified this, right? And made it legal. Like you have to do these things if you're in the pharma industry. The US hasn't taken that step, but a lot of us are starting to take that step on our own, even though the US government hasn't said do it. You started doing this in the UK. I know you have at least one US client, right? And so tell me, what's that been like as far as U.S. adoption? What percentage of your clients are in the U.S. versus in Europe and elsewhere, and how has that gone for you?
Yes, yeah, another good question. We have about 30 to 35% of our clients are over in the US and then spread out across the world. What we're finding in the US is certainly in the space of good distribution practices, their sort of awareness of it is a little bit behind that of Europe. And Europe is certainly ahead in terms of embracing those principles of good distribution practices. However, what we're finding is that with the large pharmaceutical companies, global companies, the likes of GSK, Pfizer, J&J, what they're doing is they're trying to adopt the highest standards of compliance of European good distribution practice, for example. And what they're expecting is that any of their affiliates, any of their sites around the world should apply those same standards. So you could have an office of Pfizer in the US that is looking to engage with a distribution partner in the US. And what they would expect is that partner follows those EU high standards within the US as well. So when they go to that distributor, they say you need to follow these standards, and anyone you partner with in your supply chain network has to equally conform to those standards. And that's how we see that the level of compliance is tightening in the US through that chain of information sharing in the supply chain.
Yeah, and when you look at the way the US is doing it, and I know some of them do it differently, but when you have a chance to audit and see the audits from US companies, what are the most common problems you see happening in the temp controlled pharma space in the United States right now?
Definitely temperature control is a weak area. That end-to-end temperature control, that visibility of it, there's situations where you don't get to see that. And that's where we find that the data is concerning. And we have to figure out how to kind of explain those situations. And that's the number one area of concern at this moment.
So a gap in temperature data where we don't know for certain what the temperature of that product was for a period of time. Is that where you're seeing
Absolutely.
a blind spot there? And then there's an attempt to rebuild that, or is it just, we have to live with it? Do you know how people in the US are handling that?
It's really finding solutions really that can work around those issues that we found over the years where there are those kind of blind spots where we don't have data. In terms of on the tarmac, when shipments are moving from a distributor in the US going to the airport and then flying over to another part of the world, those points that were handover points where we have missing data. These are the areas where there are solutions being identified that can actually fill those gaps, and also where we might find situations, being in the real world, where we just don't have data, or we cannot kind of guarantee the secure supply of that product with no compromise on temperature. So in those cases, risk assessment is heavily relied upon. A lot of emphasis placed on risk assessing in these areas where we have uncertainty, because there are some parts of the world where we might not see that temperature control happening due to availability of the trailers and kind of solutions, packaging solutions. We might come across situations like, and that's where risk assessment plays a really big part in kind of mitigating any sort of risks.
Okay, and let's just say there's a temperature excursion in pharma. The temp got too warm on some trailer or whatever. What's that typically look like as far as outcomes from a dollars and cents standpoint, and Does the product just have to be thrown out? How's that work?
Well, if you don't have the solutions in place or a risk assessment having been performed, you're going to find that you're going to be losing millions of dollars because that product could be complete waste. And because if there's no data to support what's happened and also to find whether that deviation or that excursion was acceptable, if you don't have the data for it, you cannot place it on any sites and you can't really kind of guarantee whether that product is safe for patients. And that's where you end up. So that's why it's so important that you have the solution in place, you have risk assessments to be able to, if things do go wrong, have the data, have the tools to be able to assess how you can continue that supply to the end patient.
Yeah, and a lot of my viewers I know they aren't really in pharma, they aren't really in life sciences. Maybe they'd like to be in these things. Um, can you explain what's cold chain pharma? What's life sciences? What are these things that I hear these people talking about who do this higher end cold chain stuff? What do they mean when they say life sciences?
Well, it's a dedicated service. Life sciences is making sure that pharmaceuticals are treated with extra care than any other commodity. Because why? It's going to that end patient. And we need to make sure that that end-to-end supply chain is keeping the product in the right conditions. And I'm not just talking about temperature, but even security, right? To make sure that the product gets to the end patient on time. And so some people think that it's just about making sure that the product's temperature is maintained and that we don't damage the product because of temperature excursions. There is also the situation where if you don't get the product to the patient on time, that could have disastrous consequences. Because some medications, for example, radiopharmaceuticals, need to be delivered by a certain time. And if we don't, they could adversely impact on the patient's safety.
Yeah, and we went through the process of getting GDP certified over the last year and a half, 2 years. And you helped us out with that. Thank you, obviously. And continue to help us out with that with responsible person services and consulting. Um, for other people who are looking into doing something similar, what do they need to know?
Well, they first need to understand what is the product that they're moving, what types of products they're going to move for their clients. And once they understand that, they need to then look at their business and see whether they've got the provisions for it. How they set up to offer that service? If they have, great. If they're not, then make sure you got the provisions to support that. And once you have it, it's then about, as I mentioned earlier, documenting everything that you do, having that audit trail of documents of how you handle the product in your supply chain. So with that means you have to develop a quality management system that would support your GDP activities, your activities for life sciences, right? And that's where you need to then make sure that the quality system you implement is then effectively trained out to all personnel. Everyone understands it, everyone lives it, and everyone practices it on a day-to-day basis. So it becomes the norm and not a quality system on the side, and I'm just going to do my day job on this side. It has to be something that seamlessly fits with your day-to-day operations, and that's really how you start to live the life science kind of way of working. If you're looking at moving from your kind of general freight logistics business to one that's dedicated to life sciences.
And quality failures almost never happen in the quality department. And so I've heard you say this 1,000 times on LinkedIn. It's just the theme is quality is everyone's responsibility. And if you guys aren't following on Sanjay on LinkedIn, you should. He's got memes. It's just entertaining. But and it is about quality, which is it's amazing that somehow you make quality entertaining because it's a dry subject, right, Sanjay? But when you say quality is everyone's responsibility, um, talk about what those people on the front lines are doing and like why that's so important, whether it's in a manufacturing process or driving a truck, picking up product. Like what do you add to that from a quality standpoint to let's say a truck driver? What he normally does if he's not doing GDP services, he just drives to a location, open doors, freight in, close doors, out, right? What are you adding to that, and what does he need to understand? That's so important that the quality department would say, if he doesn't understand this and he's just doing things the way he's always done it, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah, no, great question there, Alex. For me, it's always about thinking about who you're doing this for. And I always think of it as the patient. That person that could be your mother, one of your loved ones, or it could be yourself, right? That's going to be taking that medication that you're handling in whether you're in a manufacturing facility or in distribution. What you're doing there is you're handling a product that could be something that you could be taking. And you've got to think about, are you doing it right so that you will feel happy to take that product or even one of your family members? And it's having that understanding and that appreciation. So for me, it's all about the training. It's all about training people and training them again so that they start to understand and live the concept of what they're doing. Because as we know in the space of logistics, right, you could be moving all kinds of cargo, not just pharmaceuticals. There could be some companies that handle lots of different types of commodities. So how do you make them realize that this particular box is something that, it's got a product that could actually harm someone if you don't handle it correctly? And it's getting them to understand that. And then once they've understood the sensitivity of that product, so we'll talk about how sensitive the product is, how it can get damaged by poor handling. And then after that, we talk to them about how do you actually understand what you need to do practically on a day-to-day basis to ensure that product is looked after. And it's about those kind of controls that we put in that they are learnt about, and they understand that, okay, if I do it this way, I know that I'm going to get the product, exposed to temperatures outside of its specified range. If I handle the product this way, I know that it's going to be safe. It's not going to be stolen during transit, for example, because I've put certain things in place, and that ensures that the product will be looked after. So these are the kind of things that, goes with that level of, understanding and then acceptance of it. It's the impact on the patient. It could be any of us. And then what is it we need to do to document this to show that we are actually looking after the product when it's in our hands?
From our perspective, we saw that as well. Driver training, we've done a bunch of it, and they're doing a lot of the same things they were doing before, but they understand now why they have to keep extra records, right? Contemporaneously. Instead of being like, you want me to fill out an extra sheet? This is dumb. I don't want to do this. So I think the training certainly helps them understand why they're doing it and not just thinking, here's another sheet of paper. I don't want to do it. I'll not fill it out. I want to talk a little bit about your motivational side because there is a side to you that is passionate about people and improving people and mental health. And so one of the mantras I've seen from you is it's not who you are, it's who you become that matters. What does that mean to you? Where did you get that from?
We're all work in progress. We're all work in progress. We're never there. We never hit the pinnacle, until it's our last day. I think it's about accepting that and also learning from others to know how do we achieve that better self, and how do we get there, right? In terms of learning from one another. I mean, that's my mantra is that the only way we progress is through learning from each other and the situations that we come across, because whether it's a good situation or a bad situation, it teaches us something, and that's where I try and get that message across on LinkedIn, and some of my posts, kind of talk about when you had a tough situation at work with your manager, and how do you view that situation? Do you think that it's just shutting you down, or it's actually teaching you something to raise you up? Because from that, you can then make those informed decisions of how you then deal with that situation better next time. So every situation I see, whether it be good or bad, is teaching us something. And we just have to be open to accept that and then think, what am I learning? What am I learning from this? And that's the way I kind of view any situation that I face.
Hot topic right now, AI. AI is everywhere. When I think of AI, I think quantity over quality for the most part. And so, what's your experience been with it so far? Have you used it some? Are you using it all in your business? And where do you think AI affects quality in the future?
Right. Yeah. Well, AI is starting to spread into various sectors quite rapidly, is what I'm seeing from my perspective. And in the pharmaceutical industry, it is trying to creep its way in. However, I'm seeing that it's facing resistance. It's slowing down when it approaches the doors of the healthcare sector. And I think the reason for that is because we're dealing with something that's having an impact on the patient safety. And we need to ensure that whatever's coming through AI, it's screened and it's checked to make sure that it doesn't actually pose any risk in terms of the data that we're looking at that's relating to the patient. And so, in my view, I think it's something that is slower in the pharmaceutical industry to implement, and it's being implemented with caution and naturally because we are in a highly regulated space, so that's why it's going to have to go through a lot of screening before it gets to become more and more present in this sector. But in terms of my personal use of it, I really don't use it much. As you see on my LinkedIn posts, a lot of it is quite unique, it's quite personal, and it's something that I can't use my own words, and I use very little words, by the way, because I'm just someone who likes to keep things short and to the point as much as possible, sometimes too much. And my images are ones that I've created myself, using PowerPoint and just kind of snipping here, snipping there, and putting things together. It's what a lot of my posts are. So for me, it's something that I'm using very little. I'm using with caution. What I like to see in the industry is more automation of systems and processes, and using AI just as an aid to kind of help with moving things along a little bit quicker than they are currently, but not really using it to rely on as an endpoint at this point.
Yeah, and that's what I've noticed in my use of it is it's assisting me. It's making me better, right? But I don't see it replacing me. And I think that I think most of us will find that we're not actually being replaced by AI. We're being assisted by AI to be more productive, which is nice. I do want to point out, reiterate, 71,000 followers on LinkedIn, no AI posting going on there. So I don't know. I've seen more and more AI posts on LinkedIn lately, and my personal preference is stuff like you post rather than those AI generated posts. Um, let's talk about influences a little bit. What's one book that maybe has affected the way that you approach work?
I think the one book that stands out for me is The Secret, which is about sort of manifestation, also putting out there what you want to and then receiving. So perfect examples with what I do on LinkedIn is a lot of putting out there and trying to help people is my primary goal. And as a result of that, I'm seeing coming into Inglasia Pharma Solutions, to my wider team, a lot of opportunities where we support clients, and that's just through that act of sharing. There's a saying, there's always enough in the world for everyone. Don't think that it's getting less and less, and you need to hold on to it as much as you can, because that is not true. And I certainly see that with everything.
And then one other thing about influences, was there a mentor early on in your career, or even now, someone who sort of set you on a path or keeps you on a path that you feel is the right one, the productive one for you?
I would see that everyone I come across, Alex, is a mentor for me in some shape or form. Uh, I learned something from them. I've had some really good managers who I learned from, who've kind of shown me how to manage teams, how to interact with other departments, and how to get the best out of quality. I've also seen some people that have shown me how things can be done badly, and to stay well clear of them, and also know that we will come across these people wherever we work. They're always going to be there in our lives, and we just need to know how to best navigate them, right? So for me, I'm learning from people that have told me things I feel are good things, and I've also learned from people that have told me things that maybe I need to look out for and find ways of navigating around in the best possible way.
If you were a young person, right? Say you're a young Sanjay right now, just getting into quality, and maybe you've just gotten your first job in a quality department at a major pharmaceutical company. Um, what's the one thing you would tell that young person?
Have the thirst to learn. Really be passionate to want to learn. Don't be fearful of making mistakes because mistakes are what shape you. That's the most important thing. Sometimes, we fear that and we kind of hold ourselves back. We don't push ourselves. We don't push our boundaries, and that's fine. That's fine, But I think if you're someone that really wants to get far quickly, you have to get over that fear and ask those silly questions because that's how you really get yourself progressing far in your career. And if the place you're working at is trying to shut you down because you're being too enthusiastic, then there are so many other companies out there in the world. You don't have to feel like that's the only one that you're stuck with.
Yeah, it's a good advice. When I see young people who work for me, right? They're brand new to the industry. Sometimes it seems they're afraid to look dumb. Don't worry about it. I already know you're dumb. I knew that when I hired you. I know you don't know anything, and we have to train you and educate you. So ask questions, learn, and it's no secret that you don't know what you're doing yet. Where can people find you, Sanjay? The LinkedIn group, you, your company. Where do we find Sanjay and Inglasia?
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, we've got the Inglasia website where we offer our consultancy services in the UK. We also have Inglasia Farm Solutions Ireland. Don't know if you knew about that one, Alex, but we opened that business up early this year, and we've got our own manufacturing importation authorization license, which helps any company that's looking to import products into Europe can actually use our services there, where we do the EU import, also batch documentation reviews, quality control testing, and then the qualified person batch release into the EU market. So we're also in Ireland, in Dublin, and also just a bit of a heads up. We are developing a software that we're actually launching next year. So very excited about that. Sorry, I correct myself, not next year, but actually next month. It's even sooner. So that's coming around the corner, and there'll be more information on that in the coming weeks on social media, our website, and so on.
Awesome. I'll be watching and hoping to use it. All right, Sanjay, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.